Welcome, welcome, welcome back to my Be Health Empowered family. Thanks for joining us tonight for another week of Excuse Me, Doctor. I'm your host, Dr. Melissa Clarke. Please call me Dr. Mel. We are here every Monday night, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. And let us just jump right into creating this amazing week for ourselves with the great health topics we're going to cover tonight. And that's what we do here every week at Excuse Me Doctor. We bring you health topics based on scientific information that you can trust and be confident in and be empowered to make decisions for you, yourself, and your family. We clarify speculation, we clear up misinformation, and we debunk disinformation. And if we don't know, we say we don't know, and we let you know when the situation is changing. And we are here on YouTube and Facebook. If you're new to our family, just joining us tonight for the first time, please be sure to hit like if you're on Facebook. And if you're on YouTube, please hit that red subscribe button. So thanks for joining us. It's the holidays, y'all. I mean, it's really hitting me now. I went to a festival of lights last week, and it kind of got me into the holiday spirit. And it's also going to be our last episode for this. Happy holidays to everyone. As beautiful as they are, the holidays are a time of increased stressors on everybody. The gift shopping, the prepping for family, the cooking. And, this year, people getting together and being concerned about COVID. Um, Ironically, it's the rest of the time when it's the time when the rest of the earth rather is going into hibernation. But we as humans seem to be picking up the pace, and it really causes a lot of anxiety for people. And then on top of that, as I mentioned before, we're concerned about just COVID and the economic losses and everything that has happened this year. And so tonight, this episode is going to be dedicated to finding peace through meditation and all the amazing health benefits that meditation can bring. Not medication, but meditation can bring. So please stay tuned right here. Share, share, share again this episode with anybody you know who has chronic health problems that could be related to stress. So that's high blood pressure, that's diabetes. Basically, every chronic disease you know about is influenced by stress. So anybody who's looking to live a healthier lifestyle, has these chronic diseases to address, or has issues with depression and anxiety, tell them to tune in and take notes, because we're going to have a great panel that's going to be talking about these very topics tonight. So, in the meantime, till we get to that, what we always do is we have our weekly recap. And I have to bring in my co-producer, Mr. Wayne Bruce, to help
What's
me do that.
what's going on, Dr. Mel? How are you?
I am doing good. How are you? Good
I'm
to
great.
see you.
Good to be seen. I'm glad we're doing this episode because I've had a few things that I've had to do, and I've been under a lot of stress lately, and just with this whole pandemic, or as I call it, the pandemic, that
There's
we
that. Yeah.
has us stressed. So we really need to learn how to handle that. I mean, and hopefully our guests will give us the information we
I
need.
know they will. I know
Yeah.
they will. Well, listen, unfortunately, we start off with these numbers, which in and of themselves are stressful when we're thinking about cases being at over 50 million
Yeah.
just in the United States,
So
over 165,000 new cases a day.
a day.
And that's even before Omicron has really taken hold here. And we're looking at 58,000 hospitalizations for COVID right now. Places in Michigan, Wisconsin, New Hampshire, all the colder states, those hospitals are starting to get overwhelmed again. But overall, we're seeing a 40% uptick in hospitalizations nationwide, which is just astounding. And as far as deaths, we're right around 800,000 deaths from COVID in the United States since the pandemic started. And we're now having somewhere between 1,200 to 2,000 new deaths a day. Again, just hard to wrap your head around. Um, so yeah, they're
It's
sobering numbers.
they are sobering numbers, and I would like to also add that it's affecting everything, even sports. So many teams are, and we smile because that's my stress relief. But
Yeah.
so many teams are losing players to this thing.
Yes.
So, and we're finding out who's vaccinated and who's not vaccinated,
Who's fake vaccinated, right.
or buying vaccine cards. But we won't. That was last week's
That was
show.
last week, yeah.
That was
Well,
last week.
the other thing we're finding out in terms of these death rates is that in red states, the
Mm-hmm.
ones that voted for Trump,
Right.
um, where he got 60% or more of the vote,
Right.
that the death rate was 3 times that of those that went 60% or more for Biden. And so if you look at the numbers in October, and compare the bluest states,
Mm-hmm.
those in the top 10 percentile for
Right.
blue compared to the top 10% of red states, the death rate was actually 6 times as high in the red states. And
Wow.
it's probably just because of all the misinformation that was circulating,
Yes.
that led to people not getting vaccinated.
It's incredible.
Um, yeah, it really is, how those, numbers correlate.
So you mentioned the vaccination. So give us some vax facts. Let's get to that.
Yeah, well, we are over 200 million people who've been vaccinated. That's like 60% of the population.
Mm-hmm.
It still means that 100 million people aren't vaccinated, so there's still a little ways to go. I definitely wanna put this booster reminder out. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, if you're 16 and older, you are eligible for a booster now. And for and that would be with the Pfizer, vaccine.
Mm-hmm.
And in general, anybody, um, who got vaccinated 6 months ago, if you got vaccinated with Pfizer or Moderna, you are eligible for a booster. If you got vaccinated with Johnson and Johnson, that's only 2 months. So if it's been 2 months or more with Johnson and Johnson, you are eligible for a second shot. And I would encourage everyone to do that now, before we go into the holidays and start to get together with our families. Now is a perfect time to go out and do that.
Yes. So speaking of which, let's update everybody on uh, my favorite word to say is Reverend Howell, but I'll say it normally. Omicron. Omicron. Uh, as Reverend Howell would say, Omicron.
Well, we're talking about the Omicron variant. And, they're named after the Greek letters, so that's the letter that corresponds to O.
Mm-hmm.
So, oh my god, the Omicron variant is super contagious.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually in over 30 states and the District of Columbia. DC announced that today that it's in DC. And, it seems like it probably got to the United States even earlier than thought. So, they thought that it was December 1st, but it looks like the first date going back was actually mid-November.
Wow.
So it's been here longer than we thought. And it seems like community spread is already underway because 2/3 of the cases they've seen so far, which has been somewhere around 50 cases or so, 2/3 of them had no international travel. So
Good
that means
gracious.
community spread is pretty much underway.
Yeah.
The other thing is, like I said, it's super contagious. But Delta is still 99% of the cases here in the United States. So just keep that in mind. In other countries, though, like the UK and South
Mm-hmm.
Africa, it's rapidly taking over as the dominant variant. And even though it seems like the cases are milder, which is a good thing, the UK reported its first death today from Omicron. But in South Africa, they still haven't had any deaths. The symptoms do seem to be milder, like cough, fatigue, congestion, runny nose, that kind of thing. And the hospitalizations seem shorter, the ICU stays less frequent. So all that's great. Now, here in the United States, it does appear that 80% of the people who have gotten Omicron are vaccinated.
Wow.
And so you would expect, though, that symptoms would be milder in that group of folks. So
Right.
we're still waiting to see, as it spreads throughout the population, what it's going to look like here in the United States.
Hmm.
And we do know that Pfizer said that it holds up against the booster, hence my reminder that it would. Sorry, let me be clear about that. Pfizer said that in a lab situation, that um, 2 doses of the Pfizer vaccine do not seem to hinder Omicron, but a third dose, so basically the spike in antibodies that you get after a booster seems to be able to overwhelm the Omicron variant and be able to keep it in check. So that's the reason why I am letting everybody know now is a great time to go get your booster.
If you haven't got it, go get it. Uh, so last week we had Dr. Macklin on, and she was incredible talking about,
Yeah.
different beauty products. And this week we had some news come out about pregnancy and personal products. So
Yeah.
you want to speak to that?
Yeah, so personal products, meaning specifically beauty products. So,
Hmm.
yeah, we did that whole show and it was great last week. And we were talking about how certain chemicals and beauty products actually can disrupt our hormones and put us at higher risk. And there's some emerging evidence around, fibroids and other um, uh, gynecological issues related to hormone disruption from these chemicals. Well, now, just hot off the presses this week,
Right.
there's been information that it's linked to pregnancy.
Wow.
And there was a link to problems with pregnancy. So they found that the use of hair products, particularly hair dyes, bleaches, relaxers, and mousse, are associated with lower levels of sex steroid hormones. And those sex steroid hormones have a critical role in maintaining a healthy pregnancy and development of the fetus. And so the disruption of these hormones may contribute to poorer pregnancy outcomes like growth restriction, preterm birth, and low birth weight. So it's a correlation right now, which means there's not proof, but it's just a sort of a heads up. Hey, be very vigilant about your hair care products, what you're putting on your skin and in your body. And now, especially if you're pregnant.
So, you know, people were worried about the vaccine and pregnancy, but you should be worried about that mousse you putting in your hair. Just saying.
Yeah.
Just say. I mean, the mousse. I don't even use mousse because my hair is thick. Just saying. But women who use mousse. Now we have something for the men and my young guns out there, my young guys out there who like to go to the hookah bars and like to vape. We got some news for you.
Yeah, and it's not great news. So there was a study done at Johns Hopkins between 2016 and 2020, so pretty recently, and it found that healthy young men or healthy men aged 20 to 65 who vaped nicotine daily were twice as likely to report experiencing erectile dysfunction, not being able to get it up, compared to men who did not vape. And we know that getting an erection requires that the blood vessels in the penis be able to expand and contract in order to accommodate increased blood flow. And what's happening, it appears, is that the chemicals in tobacco and cigarettes make the blood vessels stiffer, so not as able to open and close, and therefore accommodate greater blood flow. And so erectile dysfunction is not only concerning for the sexual health of vapors, but it's really concerning for the overall blood vessel health throughout your body in terms of putting you at higher risk for heart attack and stroke because those blood vessels are what supply those organs, your brain and your heart and everywhere else in your body. And so if they're not working well, you're at higher risk for these kinds of complications. So, it was thought that e-cigarettes might be safer than regular tobacco, but not the case.
Well, I because invariably somebody will mishear what what you said, and they will say, "Oh, it causes I'm good because it causes harder or or
Stiffer
or
blood vessels?
stiffer blood vessels." Bruh,
Yeah, no,
it's not happening. Stop
you want
smoking.
you want your blood vessels to be like brand new rubber bands where they can easily expand and go back to their original
Right. You want
configuration.
stiff
When
other
a
things, not blood vessels are not one of the things you want.
Right,
Stiff.
right. When a
And
rubber
and
band dry yeah, go ahead.
and it was all I could do to keep a straight face because I was the kid in the back making fun doing sex education class. I'm that dude. I was throwing stuff. I'm just
That
saying.
that doesn't
But
surprise me, but
I want
okay.
my young guns. I want my young guys. I really want them to get off the vaping thing because they think it's cool. It is not
They think it's
cool.
cool, yeah,
It's
just like
not cool.
cigarettes used to be cool in the '50s and '60s. People think e-cigarettes are cool now, but
Right.
yeah, no, it's not worth it. It's not
It's
definitely
not
not worth
cool.
it.
Not cool. So I just want to know for all you people who are trying to get some sleep and you're going puff puff pass, but puff puff sleep, at least you think you are, maybe not.
Yeah, so this study is out of University of Toronto. They compared the sleep quantity and quality of marijuana users with non-users.
Mhm.
And they saw they looked at 146 million adults in the United States. 14.5% of them said that they had recently used cannabis, and they saw that recent cannabis users were more likely than non-users to report either short sleep or super long sleep, neither of which are healthy for you. So you really want to be in that sweet spot of 7 to 8 hours. And if you were a heavy user, meaning you used more than 20 days out of a month, this was even worse. And so it might, contradict sort of the popularly held belief that heavy marijuana use or marijuana use in general is a great sleep aid because it appears that it might not be.
Okay. Well,
Just something to keep in mind.
I'm just something to keep in mind. You might want to go get some chamomile tea to go to sleep, but stay away from that stay away from your bong late at night. Just
Right.
do don't do it. Don't do it to yourself. Don't pass the blunt to your wife or whatever you're doing. Go get some tea. Drink your tea.
Good advice.
You know what time it is, Dr. Bell?
What time is it?
It is
The weekly debunk. Stopping misinformation in its tracks.
so this week, Tyrone Twitter fingers, he got vaccinated. So his cousin texted me, Timothy Twitter fingers, and Timmy said, I saw where this one doctor on Facebook said that COVID vaccines dramatically increase levels of inflammation. So that means in 5 years, y'all vaccinated people will have more heart attacks. I'm just saying. Uh,
Yeah.
I don't know about that. Dr. Mel, is that true?
Well, this particular doctor's claims, and there's so much information out there, but this particular doctor's claims, he says, are based on testing his particular patients before and after they got vaccinated with a blood panel that's sort of a proprietary blood panel called the Pulse Cardiac Test.
Okay.
And so this was done in his own private clinic. And unfortunately, it seems like the science is not rigorous at all on this. So he did not have a comparison group. Now, why is that important? That's a group of people that would have been similar to the ones that he studied. So the people in his clinic that got vaccinated. So matching those people with people who didn't get vaccinated and doing the blood test over the same period of time that he did it on the people that were vaccinated. And the purpose again would be to compare, because the fact of the matter is there's a lot of things that can increase inflammation that this blood test allegedly measures. Things like stress, pollution, processed food diets, all these could impact those same biomarkers. So it may have increased in everyone in his practice to the same degree, even the non-vaccinated people, but because he didn't look at them, he wouldn't have known. Um, and then, I often use my little teddy bear analogy. So let's say everybody who went to the hospital with COVID got a teddy bear and they all survived. Was it the
Right.
teddy bear that made them survive? No. There are other things that could have led to that phenomena being observed. And if you don't look at all the variables and you don't have a comparison group, then you'll never know. The other thing he claims is that inflammatory cells invade the heart, but he showed no, evidence to actually back that up. There were no statistical analyses in the study. There's several typos, for what that's worth. And the motives are somewhat unclear because there's somewhat of a conflict of interest because he sells products on his website to promote his own supplements, to allegedly decrease inflammation. So, it's unclear about what those motives were in the setting of the science that wasn't really done rigorously. So I would just tell Timmy, follow Tyrone. Don't be concerned about this particular study being one that would keep you from getting vaccinated.
Your cousin got it right. Go get vaccinated like Tyrone. Come on
Yeah,
out of there, Tim.
great. So that is our debunk for this week, and I want to remind everybody before we get into our segment, our topic for the show, to start writing your questions in because we do this on a first come, first serve basis. So get your questions into the chat so that when we come back and circle back for the audience questions and comments, yours will be right there at the top. So thanks for doing that. So the show is really special this week. How to find peace in these holiday season. Um, in my book that this show is named for, it's called Excuse Me, Doctor. I've got what? Taking ownership of your health and making healthcare work for you. I talk about 5 self-health actions. Um, Nutritious eating, staying well hydrated, then the things that you do with your body, sleep is number 3, and movement is number 4. And then finally, I talk about managing the stressors in our life. I list management of the stressors last because it's the most important. The way we manage stress in our lives has profound effects on our bodies and our health. And the last 2 years, like we talked about when we opened the show, the last 2 years have been full of stressors brought about by the pandemic: death, job loss, economic loss, fear of getting COVID, isolation, divorce, domestic violence. And then here we are at the holiday season again, and we know historically the holidays have heaped even more stress into the equation. And then for we as African Americans, there have always been additional stressors in society, from microaggressions to all out assaults on our bodies. So that is why it's so important to be able to understand how we are responding to the stressors in our lives and what we can do to lessen the effect of stress on our body. And so to talk about that, we have this just 2 incredible guests who are joining us tonight. The first is Dr. Rena Boone. She's currently the regional director of the David Lynch Foundation in Washington, D.C., also executive director of the Meditation Center at the Ark, which serves under-resourced communities in DC. She has been a certified teacher of Transcendental Meditation for the past 40 years, and along with her team, teaches others to prevent and eliminate the epidemic of toxic stress and trauma, which undermines the health and well being of individuals, families, and communities. Welcome, Dr. Boone. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for welcoming me. It's my joy and pleasure to be here. You have a great show.
Well, thank you so much. Glad you can be a part of it tonight. And then we're also welcoming Dr. Yolanda Ragland, friend of the show. She has been here before. I'm so happy she is coming back. So, Dr. Yolanda Lewis Ragland is board certified in both pediatrics and obesity medicine, but she's also a practitioner of Transcendental Meditation, and she sits on the board of the David Lynch Foundation. She's the author of multiple books, most recently, Pandemic Inspired Navigating a Triple Pandemic, Volume 1, and Navigating a Triple Pandemic, Volume 2, the COVID Virus Vaccine Facts, Fiction, and Fears edition. And that has also, most recently in the last couple of weeks, been followed up by a release of the Educators edition. Welcome, Dr. Lewis Ragland. Thanks so much for joining us.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for having me back. This is a very special show and very important. So I'm so glad that you're tackling this subject.
Great. Well, we are blessed to have both of you tonight. And so, Dr. Boone, I'm going to start with you. In my introduction, where I talked about your wonderful accomplishments, I mentioned the term toxic stress and what effect that's having on individuals and communities. Can you tell us, what does toxic stress mean?
Yes, I would be happy to. When we talk about toxic stress, we talk about a buildup of stress that is caused by adverse traumatic experiences over time. An example of this would be living in a home environment where there is mental abuse, and sometimes both, or living in a community, as some people do in Ward 8, where we have our center, where there's gun violence and subjected to gun violence, hearing gun.
I think we lost Dr. Boone. So maybe Dr. Ragland, you could pick up on that and tell us. I know you're a pediatrician, and I know you uh, have heard the term adverse childhood experiences. Maybe you could talk to us about that and what that means in the setting of toxic stress, which I think is where Dr. Boone was going.
Yeah, absolutely. And so one of the things I want people to understand is we understand that stress itself isn't all bad, right? There is some good stress, that stress of having, a midterm or finals, and your body, you produce a little adrenaline, you get a little excited, somebody gets your phone number, they finally call, your heart palpitates, all of that stuff. That's that good stress. That toxic stress is, first of all, it's prolonged. There's no end to it. It's constant. So we talk about a fight or flight syndrome. Fight or flight is okay when it's brief and it just motivates you to get excited and move when you need to move. But when you're constantly in that fight or flight overstimulation, studies have found that even in pregnancy, it's very interesting you all were talking about pregnancy, even in pregnancy, in places that are like Ward 7, Ward 8, and I'm not going to say just in those wards, but just because this is where we live and this is where we're serving. When you have gun violence, when you have domestic violence, when you have situations where unemployment, housing insecurity, food insecurity, that constant stress, even of a pregnant woman, is actually affecting the neural development of a fetus, and even that fetus is having there's a difficulty and a break in the axis of the normal growth of the brain. So this child is then born into this stress environment, and those adverse childhood experiences, we're finding they can start before the child is even born. Right. So
Wow.
that's already
Yeah.
happening. Then once they're in this environment, some of those adverse episodes might be, again, domestic violence. It might be poverty, hunger. It might be hearing gunshots, that stress of that, um, education, cognitive issues, having just a family member. We are talking about COVID and the COVID numbers. One of the things I've had to talk about as a pediatrician is that we've actually experienced orphans losing parents to the COVID virus. That's an adverse childhood experience. So you might
Right, and
have a
it's
family member go off to
disproportionately
prison.
happened among Black and brown children. Yeah.
Absolutely. So we're increasing we're increasing the amount of adverse childhood experiences just within this COVID pandemic, of losing our parents to the virus, people getting sick because of this virus. So this thing is very, very important to have this conversation in both adults and children. And this is that toxic stress that we're talking about, and why we look for ways to help mitigate the stress.
Thank you. That was an excellent answer. I think we have Dr. Boone back. Thank you. And I wanted to mention too, you mentioned the effects of toxic stress on the developing fetus. We're also seeing evidence from studies done during the Holocaust and the Dutch potato famine, which happened around the same time, that when you have stressors on on a mother, that you can actually see the effects of that stress. It changes her reproductive her DNA, and those changes can get passed down to the fetus. So even before she conceives, the changes that happen to her DNA can get passed down, and that next generation is at increased risk for things like PTSD and obesity and heart disease. So I know I'm not sure how much you were able to hear Dr. Boone, but Dr. Lewis Ragland talked about Ward 7 and Ward 8. For those people who don't live in DC, can you just tell us a little bit about some of the challenges that are faced by members of that community, which is not unique as you move across the United States?
Yes. I am so, first of all, I just want to say how fortunate I feel to have a meditation center in Southeast Washington, D.C. in Ward 8, to be able to be there and serve the community, because there are so many disparities: housing disparity, food disparities, job disparities. I mean, the list just goes on and on. And before I got cut off, I was saying just being in an environment that sometimes it's just riddled with gun violence. When I first came on board working at the ARC in January of 2018, I was driving to work one day, and there were people on the side of the roads holding up signs saying, "Stop the violence in our community." And when I saw those signs, I thought, this is why we are here, because we have a way of stopping the violence. And it has to do with helping people to get rid of stress, which is fueling the violence to begin with. And so there at the ARC, being there with 14 other partner organizations, such as Children's National, the Boys and Girls Clubs of America, there are 3 schools there, all of us helping to provide services that will improve and uplift the quality of life for people. So we have a meditation center, and we are downstairs from the Children's National Health Clinic. And right from the very beginning, when we opened our doors, I thought to myself, who is going to come? Who will want to learn how to meditate? And people started coming. And since we opened our doors, we have taught over 500 people. And it
Wow,
just, the
that's
numbers keep, I know, and the numbers keep increasing. We
wow.
recently, in July, August of this year, we applied for a grant coming from the mayor's office. There was a gun violence prevention grant, and we received that grant along with other organizations to serve the community. And so we were able to provide our services for people who would not normally maybe even know about meditation, but we had a vigorous campaign. We also have been working with Community of Hope. We got a Bellevue
Well,
Family
Dr.
Success.
Boone, Dr. Boone,
Uh-huh.
before we talk about the work, which I know is incredible, let's first break down for our audience what is meditation. And I think the particular form of meditation that you practice, transcendental meditation.
Yes, I would be happy to. When when we think of meditation, and oftentimes when I talk to people, when people come to learn about the type of meditation that we have to offer, I ask people, what are you looking for? What does meditation mean to you? And I would like to say that every time I ask that question, I hear the same answers. I'm looking for peace. I'm looking for inner peace and calm. I want a way to get rid of stress. I want to improve my life. It's just too much. And so meditation means different things to different people. And there are many forms of meditation. It can be very confusing to people. So what I'd like to do is describe brain science has shown us that there are three types of meditation practices. And I will tell you how TM fits into this. First of
Okay.
all, there is open monitoring. And that's a type of meditation technique where we put our attention, we watch our thoughts or we watch our breathing, and any type of meditation technique where you go within, I feel is going to have some benefit. Then there's
Right.
also focused attention. And that's where, let's say you focus on trying to rid your mind of thoughts or focusing on your breath, something like that. Transcendental meditation is unique because with TM, what happens in 20 minutes of meditation, sitting comfortably with the eyes closed, the mind settles inward. And that's what people want because how many thoughts do we have a day? The mind is always thinking, and we want relief from that. And so when the mind settles inward, the mind gets what it wants, which is peace and calm and silence. And because there's a mind body connection, whatever the mind experiences, the body is going to experience. So the body gains a deep level of rest and relaxation. This technique is not hard to learn and it's not hard to do. It is easy and it's effortless. And right
Right.
from the very first meditation, we find that people begin to have the experience of what they are looking for.
So, what would you say to somebody who doesn't know where to start when it comes to meditation?
When people come and they don't know where to start, the first thing that we do is to give an introductory talk where we explain what meditation is. You know, when people come to learn, what I find is that people know that they're looking for something and they can even express what it is. Just like a woman the other day said, I feel like I'm about ready to pop and I
Mm,
need some
yeah.
inner peace and calm. Or the mother who came and said, I just, in a short amount of time, lost two family members from homicide, and I
Wow.
have to get this stress off of me. And
Mhm.
then when I talk about meditation and I explain what it is, how it works, people say, I'm ready. I
Yeah.
am ready. I want to
Yeah.
try. And then
So,
we teach them technique.
yes. So you mentioned you mentioned a phrase in there, the mind body connection. I want to go to Dr. Lewis Ragland to talk about when you go into meditation, what's actually happening on a a physical level in your body that helps to address the chronic diseases I mentioned up at the front of the show, high blood pressure and diabetes and all these different chronic diseases.
So that's a great question. So one of the things that is really important to understand, and we were talking about toxic stress and prolonged stress, there are a couple of things that happen physiologically with the body with this prolonged toxic traumatic stress. So very particularly, there's an axis that from your brain to certain organs in your body, and particularly there are two glands on top of your kidneys called adrenal glands. And those adrenal glands, when you're stressed, and again, there's good stress and bad stress, and that prolonged stress will release at least two hormones that we know of: adrenaline, hence adrenal glands, as well as cortisol. Well, one of the things that we found is that there are at least three organs in particular that these two hormones affect. One is the vessels, right? The blood vessels, the cardiovascular system. And what we find is that prolonged exposure to cortisol and adrenaline actually causes hypertension, high blood pressure. The other organ that the cortisol and adrenaline affects is the digestive system, or system rather, the digestive system, the stomach. And what we found is there's decreased digestive activity when you have this prolonged exposure to cortisol and adrenaline. And the third organ is your liver. And we found that with that prolonged stress, the liver actually converts glycogen to glucose. Well, when you think about it, these are three of the disease processes that we're affected most disproportionately by.
Right.
When we talk about the blood vessels, it's the hypertension seen in the Black community, right? When we talk about the digestive system, it's the obesity seen in the Black in the Black and brown communities. When we talk about that liver converting glycogen to glucose, guess what? That's the diabetes that we're seeing in our Black and brown communities. So there is a direct connection between this prolonged toxic stress that we're experiencing, and I won't blame it all on microaggressions and racism, but it definitely is contributing, as well as with one of the things you talked about, our nutrition status, our lack of exercise, our inability to sort of deal with this stress. So all of these things
Outlets for the stress. Yeah.
And so those are the physiological effects of those particular hormones on us. And if I can go right into it, studies have shown that TM specifically, and we can't say this about all meditation, but TM specifically lowers blood pressure. It actually lowers your risk of heart attack and stroke by more than 25%. The American Heart Association actually put out a statement that corroborates what we found in these studies. It lowers stress and anxiety. And one of the things that's more, I think impressive than anything is it actually lowers cortisol levels. And so we have found that those are the most important that are physiologic. But guess what? It improves. A lot of times you made the mistake earlier to say it was a slip of the tongue, medication over when you were saying medication. Right? Hey, guess what? This is what I love about meditation. Most of the times we talk about medication, we have to talk about side effects, and we usually mumble it and we say it really fast. You listen to the commercial, and you're like,
sounds like an auctioneer.
ED. Well, we have actually really positive side effects of this meditation, other than the lowering of the cortisol, the lowering of the hypertension and heart attacks and strokes. It actually improves your brain function, improves cognition, makes you feel calm. There better sleep, better digestion. Say that again.
Yeah. Better sleep. We said at the same time.
Right. And better digestion. So these are actually all of the positive side effects of TM, as well as the main things that we're here to talk about when it comes to stress and anxiety and hypertension. And so from my standpoint as a practitioner and a health provider, I want to write this script for as many people as I can because it has such positive side effects. And as a pediatrician, when we talk about that brain function, this is actually something that I have been participating in a study for children who have ADHD and other cognitive behavioral issues, that meditation has been shown to be have a very positive effect for them. So,
which is huge, because I know with all the overstimulation that we have from emails and social media and texts and everything, I think we all have some degree of ADD, or so
I believe we
that's
do.
so, unfortunately, it is 9:45. I had so many more questions, but we have to go to our audience because I want to see if they have some questions for us. So, Wayne, you got anything coming out of the chat for us?
Well, we have more coming out of our comments, more statements about TM and meditation, and just wanted to go back to a question. Valerie Spalding Parker, can you define mindfulness and all it entails?
Dr. Boone, would you like to take that?
Yes, and I know that mindfulness is a type of meditation technique, and it falls under the category of open monitoring. And that's where, and I have taught people who have practiced mindfulness, and then they've learned TM as well. But with mindfulness, it's like I said, it's a matter of a meditation practice where you are watching your thoughts. You are not engaged in your thoughts, but you're watching your thoughts, or you're watching your breathing. You're disengaged with, you don't have to do anything about your thoughts. And I was explaining that transcendental meditation is a technique where you transcend. Transcend means to go beyond. Go beyond what? Go beyond the surface level of the mind where we're having all of our thoughts all of the time, and transcending to quieter, quieter, quieter levels of the mind, and eventually reach the level of least excitation of the mind, where the mind is just experiencing stillness and quiet and peace at the source of thought. And this happens easily and effortlessly. There's no effort involved in practicing TM. And that's why people get the results that they do, and oftentimes right away experience the benefits that Dr. Ragland was talking about, the health benefits,
Yeah.
both mental
What are
and
some of the
Okay.
physical.
results? What are some of the results that you're seeing in Ward 8, where the meditation center is, with some of the folks that are coming through?
Absolutely. It's so rewarding for me to teach someone this technique. For an example, I'll give you an example of something that happened one day. A young woman came to learn the technique, and when she walked through the door, she was actually having a panic attack, and she was having a hard time breathing even.
Yeah.
And I taught her how to meditate in a short amount of time. It doesn't take long to learn. She came out of meditation smiling and relaxed.
Wow.
Wow.
One of the things that people report often is that immediately they sleep better. It's easier
Mm.
to fall asleep at night. You know, how often do people go to sleep at night and can't shut the mind off? The mind is just figuring this thing out and worrying about this, and the body can't settle down and rest. And people will come back and say, I slept so well last night. That's one of the first things that I noticed. I taught
That's
someone
great.
once I taught a man once who was an ex-policeman who had sleep apnea. And he came back and a few days later said, I am sleeping like a baby for the
Wow.
first time in
Wow.
20
And
years.
we know that,
Uh,
the stress that police officers
yes,
are
we
under.
do.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
We're about to enter the lightning round right now, so I would like we have a few questions and just like 5 minutes to get them in. And so if I can ask this question to, how close is TM to hypnosis? Trina Williams.
There is
Uh,
no connection.
Okay.
TM is not hypnosis. There's no control of the mind whatsoever.
Okay. And
It
then
yeah.
we
is
have
not
Michelle.
that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm sorry. We have Michelle Walker Scales. Is there a distinct difference between meditation and prayer?
The difference between meditation and prayer is something that we consciously do. We are directing the mind to pray. We're directing our thoughts when we pray. When we meditate, we're not involved. When we practice transcendental meditation, we are not involved in directing our thoughts in any kind of way. We are simply going within and experiencing the peace and quiet that's already there within the mind, easily and effortlessly. Prayer is something that we do outside of meditation, outside of the practice of transcendental meditation.
Right.
Okay.
And there's no reason why the two can't coexist. You can pray and you
Absolutely.
can meditate.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. And prayer is
Absolutely.
you with a higher being, whereas meditation is you with yourself, just so that we
Okay.
understand that.
Thank you.
Right.
So we have another question coming from Vivian Farmer Blunt. I just started Reiki. What are your thoughts? I'm enjoying it.
Dr. Ragland, would you like to take that? Dr. Lewis Ragland?
Well, so Reiki's a little different, right? And we're focusing on certain parts of the body and certain healing centers within the body. And again, meditation is very different. Meditation is really focusing on the mind, focusing on settling the mind, and it actually lowers the stress hormones. It lowers, and again, you go inside. There is that mind body connection, but we're not focusing on parts of your body like Reiki is. And so they are very different, but I think they're both very helpful. And I'm an integrative medicine doc, so those are both good medical, alternative medical modalities, but they should go along with traditional medicine.
Fantastic. Right. We have another question. Actually, Yvonne Z. Smith has a few questions. And one says, how much does it cost to come to your center? And she learned meditation through an app called Headspace.
Okay.
Yes. And when a person learns transcendental meditation, it's actually a course. It's a 4-day course. TM is taught over 4 consecutive days, about an hour and a half each day. And we have 4 Ward 8 in Washington, D.C., and I know it's different depending on where you live in the country, but we have a sliding fee scale for people who live in our community, and also in Ward 8 and in Washington, D.C. We've been very fortunate to receive these grants that we're able to teach people who don't have to pay anything because the grant is providing. But I know that your audience is all over the country. And so I encourage people to reach out to find out where a TM center is in their area and see what they have to offer and provide.
And to
Right. Is
add on to
TM
that,
ever taught online?
I was going to say Headspace is a different type of a different type of meditation, but TM does have an online component, even though we're just now starting an app and things that you can do online. Generally, we do it in person. Marina was my teacher, by the way. However, there is an online component, especially given the pandemic, we've actually started to do. So yes, you can still do it online.
And I
And
wanted
so
to
I
point
wanna
out
just
that
add-
scrolling across the bottom there for our audience is the address of the David Lynch Foundation if anyone wants to have the URL, if anyone wants more information.
Well,
And one thing I just wanted to add about the TM app, people have a choice, and we explain the difference when they come to their introductory talk. We explain the difference between learning in person or learning through the TM app, but a TM teacher is guiding the whole process.
Got it.
So that's a wrap, folks. That's a great show.
Wow. That went way too quickly, but I am just so honored that you all joined us tonight on our last show of the year. This has definitely, I think, left our audience with hopefully whetted their appetite for learning more about meditation, learning more about TM, learning how to manage the stressors of this year, of this holiday season, to be able to go into 2022 armed and ready with some tools that will help not only address their mental, but also their physical well-being. So thank you so much. And thank you so much, Wayne, for giving us those great questions from the audience. Audience, you all are fantastic with your questions. And just to summarize, I wanted to mention that there is a study that I have been asked to tell my audience about that's going on at Howard University. And it is to try to understand how people have been coping with the pandemic, coping with the misinformation and disinformation that's out there, how it might have influenced your choices based upon all the information that you've been getting, including what I have been providing through this show with my co-producers on Excuse Me, Doctor. And so to that end, if you're interested in participating, it's filling out 3 surveys, and you don't have to fill out all the surveys. You don't have to answer all the questions, but just as many of them as you can and you're comfortable with. And there will actually be compensation for the time spent answering those surveys. And so if you're interested, please, indicate so in the chat. I'd really appreciate it. And then one of my research assistant will be reaching out to you. Her name is Dana Harvey. She'll just DM you. And if you are interested, she can give you more information. So, and she may be reaching out to those people who have left comments during my show. If you're not interested, just say so. So again, if you are definitely interested, please put it in the chat so she'll know to reach out to you. We have just had an incredible year here on Excuse Me, Doctor. I hope you all have, who've come along with us for this journey, have enjoyed it. We're on a brief hiatus until 2022, January, which is right around the corner. Until I talk to you then, please remember, have a wonderful and safe and blessed holiday season. And remember to be wise, to be well, and to be health empowered. Take care, everyone.